Can you stand by the bathroom wall so you don't ruin the wedding photos with your age? Her voice was sugar poured over gravel. I watched her fingertips settle the veil, watched the camera flash catch the diamonds at her ears, and wondered how something so bright could land like a bruise. For a heartbeat, the whole reception held its breath. Waiters mid-step, the band tuning a last chord, a cousin's laugh chopped neatly in half. I smiled small, careful, the way you smile at a dog that hasn't decided whether to bite, and said nothing. Inside me, something didn't shatter. It set. A hairline crack I'd ignored for years fused into a hard, clean line. I looked across the ballroom, gold runners, white roses, the life I'd helped pay for curling out of centerpieces and ribbon chairs. My son, my David, was at the head table, laughing at something. The best man said, not looking at me. Of course he wasn't. He's always smiling in the direction of the loudest applause. Of course, I told the bride, voice steady. Whatever makes the pictures perfect. I stood, smoothed my dress navy beaded, bought on faith and coupons, and walked to the gift table. My box sat there like a quiet secret. White paper, silver bow, the kind of wrapping that keeps people guessing. I lifted it, feeling the weight settle into my palms. A bridesmaid noticed. Her eyebrows flipped up and then down like a seesaw she'd rather not ride. I didn't rush. I moved through the room the way a tide recedes, steadily, without apology, past the photographer angling a softbox, past the aunt who has always called me dear the way some people say driver, past my son, who adjusted his cufflinks and never saw me pass. The doors swung open, and the reception's warmth fell away. Outside, evening air, cool and damp, the parking lot's wet black shine catching the fire of lanterns. Somewhere far off, a train stitched a line through the dark. I let the noise of celebration flatten behind me until it was only bass and light. A taxi idled under the portico. The driver looked at the box, then at me, then at the ballroom glow inside. He said, nothing, which felt like mercy. I slid into the back seat, cradled the gift in my lap, and watched the country club shrink in the rear window. Roses and gold and 100 cameras hungry for youth. Everything okay back there? The driver asked finally, glancing at me in the mirror. Better than it looks, I said, and realized it was true. Streetlights stitched the ride home into tidy pieces. Each pool of light showed me a different woman, one with damp lashes, one with a mouth set like a latch, one who had learned tonight that mocking a person's years has a way of aging a marriage before it takes its first breath. I didn't cry. I'd done enough of that when no one was looking. Instead, I counted, not seconds or miles, the small costs no one else noticed. The double shifts, the rent paid late so tuition wasn't, the birthdays planned with coin jars and coupons. You can spend a lifetime giving until your hands learn the shape of empty. You can also decide, one evening under a chandelier, that empty is not your shape anymore. To my building, the driver offered to carry the box. I told him I had it. I always have. The stairwell smelled like someone else's dinner, and the kind of lemon cleaner that doesn't fool anyone. In my apartment, I set the box on the table and turned on only the lamp by the window. The city swam up, tail lights, lit kitchens, a neighbor laughing to high into a phone call. I made tea. I wrapped my hands around the heat and let the quiet be loud for once. The box waited on the table, a punctuation mark at the end of a long sentence. Funny how paper and ribbon can look like innocence when what's inside is a verdict. I ran a thumb along the crease of the bow. I could open it. I could touch the documents again, reassure myself that the ink hadn't evaporated, that numbers and names and signatures still belonged to me. I didn't. I already knew what it said. I'd read it a dozen times by lamplight, each time letting the truth spread a little farther under my skin. My phone lit up on the counter, a soft square of insistence. David's name glowed once, then again. I let it go dark. There would be time for conversations. There would be time for apologies rehearsed in mirrors, for you know how it is on wedding days, and the kind of sorry that doesn't cost anything. Tonight, I wanted the cost to sit with someone else for a change. I walked to the window. In the glass, I was both me and a stranger. The same face I've worn through school plays and hospital rooms and graduation photos where I stood just outside the frame. The bride wanted me on the bathroom wall, out of the shot, out of the story. I thought of the women I've known, pressed into corners to keep someone else's picture clean. I thought of all the times I'd chosen silence and called it grace. Some stories do not end when you leave the room. Some begin. Tonight, I didn't fling words like plates or chase anyone down with my hurt. I picked up my gift and left. I let the music finish without me. I let the cameras blink toward a future that didn't know me yet. Steam rose from my cup, bending in the air like a slow bow. I blew it aside and took a long sip that steadied everything. If anyone asks, I was rude to go. Ungrateful, dramatic, oversensitive, pick your word. Those words used to land like stones. Tonight, they skimmed the surface and sank without touching bottom. 3 weeks ago, something happened that changed the math of my life. I didn't tell a soul. I wrapped it in white paper and a silver bow, intending to place it in my son's hands with all the tenderness I once saved for his scraped knees and fevered nights. But tenderness without respect is just a trick light pretty, and gone when the switch flips. So I lit a different lamp. The phone buzzed again. I let it. I watched the city breathe, the amber and blue of it sliding over the glass, and set my palm on the box not to claim it, but to bless it goodbye. Tomorrow, I thought. Tomorrow we start telling the story from the beginning. I didn't always feel like a shadow at my own family table. There was a time when I believed my son would remember every sacrifice, every sleepless night, and one day look at me with gratitude instead of calculation. I was 27 when David was born. My husband, Harold, held him first, beaming, trembling, swearing he could already see his nose in the baby's tiny face. Back then, we were a team. A modest house, second-hand furniture, a dream stitched together with overtime shifts, and Harold's steady voice promising it would all be worth it. But life has a way of teaching you the cost of dreams. Harold was gone too soon, heart attack in his 50s, and suddenly, I was a widow raising a teenage boy who needed shoes, lunch money, and hope all at once. There was no space for grief when bills waited at the door. I worked nights at the diner, mornings at the library, weekends cleaning houses. My body broke in small ways, knees aching, hands raw from bleach, but I kept telling myself it was temporary. Someday, David would grow up, stand on his own, and see how hard I had fought to hold our world together. Those early years, he was my reason for everything. When kids teased him for his worn-out sneakers, I'd skip meals so I could buy him new ones. When he wanted to join the school trip, I collected aluminum cans until I had enough to cover the fee. He never knew the hours I spent in laundry rooms, crying into the hum of machines, counting coins, trying to stretch them into dinners that looked like more than they were, and maybe I didn't want him to know. Maybe I thought shielding him from struggle was love. Maybe I believed sparing him would teach him kindness. Instead, it taught him expectation. I remember the first time he asked casually, "Mom, you've got it, right?" He was 16, standing in the kitchen with his baseball glove slung over one shoulder, asking for money for a tournament. He didn't say thank you. He didn't see my hesitation. He just assumed I would cover it, because hadn't I always? That assumption followed him into college, into his first apartment, into every temporary loan that was never repaid. Rent deposits, utility bills, medical insurance. Each time I told myself, this is what mothers do. Each time the silence after my sacrifices grew heavier. Then came Brittany. The first time I met her, she gave me that polite smile people use when they're checking off a box. Polite, but sharp. She complimented my casserole like it was a museum artifact, something out of step, worth mentioning for its quaintness. David laughed at her jokes. He didn't notice the sting behind them. Or maybe he did, and chose not to. I tried to be patient. Young love can be careless, I told myself. But the more time passed, the clearer it became. Brittany wasn't careless. She was deliberate. Every comment about modern lifestyles, every raised eyebrow at my thrift store clothes, every question about whether I was managing okay on Social Security. It wasn't small talk. It was dismissal. David soaked it in like sunlight. He started echoing her words about downsizing, about how older people don't need much. My son, the boy I starved for so he could eat, was gently nudging me toward invisibility. I clung to the hope that love would win out, that he'd wake up one day, look at me, and see not a burden but a woman who'd given him everything. But that hope began to curdle. At family dinners, they'd laugh over Brittany's new handbag, and I'd quietly eat the cheapest thing on the menu. At Christmas, they'd cancel plans last minute because something came up, and I'd sit alone, convincing myself I didn't mind. Every cut was small, but small cuts bleed too. By the time the wedding was announced, I should have known better. Still, I told myself, maybe this was the moment things would change. Maybe marriage would ground them, remind them of family roots. I scraped together savings for a dress, I skipped meals for weeks to buy the wine glasses Brittany had once admired online. I thought, this will show her I care. This will show David I am more than the background noise of his life. But the truth was simpler, harsher. To them, I was already furniture, something useful to lean on, until it clashed with the decor. And yet 3 weeks before that wedding, I made a choice I hadn't made in years. A choice that would tear the story wide open. The first time I met Brittany, she shook my hand like she was testing the texture of a fabric she already knew she wouldn't buy. It was a Sunday afternoon, 3 years before the wedding. David had insisted on hosting dinner at their new apartment. She makes the best lasagna, Mom, he told me with the eagerness of a boy bringing home a prize. I showed up with a pie balanced carefully in my arms, hoping to make a good impression. The moment I stepped through the door, I knew I was a guest, not family. Everything gleamed: white counters, chrome fixtures, not a single second-hand item in sight. And then there was Brittany. Perfect hair, perfect smile, perfect eyes that flicked over my modest cardigan like they were tallying thread count. Oh, she said, her voice syrupy. That's such a cozy sweater. So vintage. Vintage. The polite cousin of old. I smiled anyway, the way women like me are trained to. Thank you, dear. It's kept me warm for years. David laughed. Not unkindly, but not protectively either. That was the first sting. Dinner carried on like a performance I wasn't invited into. Brittany told stories about work, about new handbags, about weekend trips to places I'd never afford. She held David's hand across the table, her nails glinting under the light. Every so often she'd aim a question at me, but it always landed like a stone skipping water. So, how do you spend your days, Martha? Must be so relaxing now that you're retired. Retired. As if I'd been given a gold watch and a pension instead of scraping by on widow's benefits and part-time shifts. I keep busy, I said lightly, volunteering at the library, walking. I didn't mention the nights I counted coins to stretch into groceries. She nodded, already bored. That's nice. By dessert, I realized what I was up against. Brittany wasn't cruel with knives. She was cruel with feathers. Every word a tickle that somehow left scratches. Over the years, those scratches deepened. At birthdays, she'd raise her champagne and toast David's career, then glance at me with that too bright smile that meant, and what do you do again? At Christmas, she'd unwrap designer purses while I handed over knitted scarves or cookbooks. So thoughtful, she'd coo, slipping my gifts aside like placeholders. And David, he changed, slowly, like water wearing down stone. He stopped noticing the small ways I contributed: the casseroles, the little envelopes with just a bit to help. He began echoing Brittany's words, casual comments about how older people should downsize or maybe you'd be more comfortable in a smaller place. Each time, my heart clenched, not at the words, but at the indifference behind them. I wanted to believe he didn't mean it. That love for his mother still lived under the polish of his new life. But every time I swallowed the hurt, silence made it easier for him to forget me. Still, I kept trying. I brought pies to dinners, offered help with bills, praised Brittany's outfits even as she smirked at my clearance rack dresses. I told myself patience was love, that one day they'd see me clearly. But the truth? Brittany never wanted clarity. She wanted control. And David, my David, let her have it. There was one night that sealed it for me. We were at a restaurant, Brittany showing off another purse, this one imported from Italy. The price tag alone could have paid my rent for 3 months. I tried to smile, but David leaned back, grinning proudly. She deserves the best, Mom, don't you think? I nodded, my fork heavy in my hand. My meal was the cheapest item on the menu, chosen carefully to fit within the cash I'd tucked into my purse. While they laughed over wine, I quietly drank water, praying the bill wouldn't come to me. That night, walking home in the cold, I realized something. They weren't laughing with me. They were laughing past me. I wasn't part of their story anymore. I was background, filler, someone to tolerate until the check was covered or the casserole was served. So when the wedding was announced, I told myself it was my chance. Maybe, finally, I'd be recognized. I bought the nicest dress I could afford, the kind of navy that whispered dignity. I had my hair done professionally, a luxury I hadn't allowed myself in years. And I chose a gift Brittany had once admired online: crystal wine glasses, more than I could afford. But isn't that what mothers do? I wrapped them carefully, white paper, silver bow, the same way I had wrapped every sacrifice of my life: neat, presentable, invisible. But as I placed that box on the wedding gift table, I didn't know yet what I would learn 3 weeks before. The big day. I didn't know yet that fate, in the form of a folded slip of paper, was about to hand me something sharper than feathers, something that could cut back. It happened on an ordinary Thursday evening, the kind of night you don't remember until it rearranges everything you thought you knew. The grocery store was nearly empty, just the hum of refrigerators and the squeak of a mop somewhere down the aisle. I was clutching a can of tomato soup and a package of saltines, counting coins in my hand like a child learning numbers. My cart was mostly bare. It had been that way for months. Behind the counter, Tommy Murphy, who'd been bagging groceries since high school, gave me that tired but polite smile. "Evening, Mrs. Williams. Long day?" I nodded, sliding quarters across the counter. It wasn't embarrassment that tightened my chest. It was the bone-deep exhaustion of knowing this was my normal. Rationing soup, pretending crackers were dinner.as. He handed me my receipt. Tommy gestured at the glowing lottery machine by the door. "Jackpot's up to 60 to million," he said, his voice casual. "Machine's working again if you're feeling lucky." I almost laughed. Lucky? What? An absurd word for someone who pinched pennies to buy soup. But something, call it defiance, or maybe desperation, made me pause. I thought of Brittany's handbag collection, each one worth more than my monthly rent. I thought of David's offhand comments about downsizing, about how older people don't need much. Quick pick, I heard myself say, sliding a $5 bill across the counter. Tommy blinked, surprised. "First time?" "In a long time." The machine word spit out a slip of paper with 6 numbers. It looked so insignificant. A receipt for hope. I folded it carefully and tucked it into my purse, next to the grocery receipt that showed how little I had left. On the walk home, 45 minutes because I couldn't spare the bus fare, I replayed every dismissive comment I'd swallowed, every dinner I'd been excluded from, every moment my love had been treated as obligation. The ticket felt heavier than paper. It felt like rebellion. That Saturday, I made tea and sat in my dark apartment, the television volume low so I wouldn't disturb the neighbors. The drawing came on. Bright lights, smiling host, numbers flashing across the screen. 7, 14, 21, 35, 47, Powerball. 9. My heart stumbled. I checked once, twice, 3 times. My hands shook so violently I nearly spilled my tea. But the truth didn't change. Every number matched. I sat there in stunned silence, the hum of the refrigerator louder than the pounding in my ears. Me, Martha Williams, 64 years old, widow mother, invisible at my own son's wedding, was now holding a ticket worth $62 million. I laughed, a sound sharp and foreign in my throat. It wasn't joy, not yet. It was disbelief, tinged with something darker. Liberation. The smart thing, I knew, would have been to call David immediately, to share the news with my only family, to imagine his happiness, Brittany's shriek of surprise, the way they'd tell everyone that I had changed their lives forever. But I didn't reach for the phone. I reached for the small jewelry box on my dresser, the one that still held Harold's wedding band and my mother's pearls. I slipped the lottery ticket inside, folded it neatly, and closed the lid, because suddenly, I had a very different kind of wedding gift in mind. The following week was a blur of government offices and paperwork. The lottery commission was nothing glamorous: fluorescent lights, beige walls, a woman named Janet explaining taxes and direct deposits like she was processing a parking permit. "After taxes, your lump sum comes to 38.4 million, she said. The number was absurd, impossible. More money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. She recommended financial advisors, careful planning, slow decisions. I nodded politely, but inside, I was already certain. I didn't want a yacht. I didn't want designer handbags. I wanted one thing: choice. For the first time in decades, my life would not be dictated by what I could afford, but by what I wanted. Within days, I opened new accounts, bought a modest car, nothing flashy, just freedom on 4 wheels. And then, I walked into a real estate office and pointed at a photograph taped to the window, an oceanfront house with floor-to-ceiling windows and a deck that looked out over the Atlantic. "Cash buyer," I told the stunned agent. "I want it." But even as I stood on that deck, listening to the waves crash below, a part of me held back. This wasn't just about me. It was about the white box with the silver bow waiting for my son's wedding day. I had planned to give them crystal glasses. Instead, I began preparing a gift that would change everything. A deed, a check, Proof that sometimes the quiet ones hold the sharpest cards. I imagined their faces, the shock, the gratitude, maybe even an apology. I should have known better. The box sat on my kitchen counter for 2 weeks, white paper gleaming under the lamplight, silver ribbon tied with a precision that belied the storm inside me. Inside, folded neatly, was the deed to a house worth nearly $3 million, and a cashier's check made out to David and Brittany for another 3. My son's future, wrapped up in quiet elegance, ready to be placed in his hands. Every evening after work, I'd sit across from that box with my tea cooling beside me, imagining the moment, their shock, their joy, the way Brittany's smile might falter into something real for once, maybe even tears of gratitude instead of superiority. I pictured David pulling me into a hug, whispering, "Mom, I never knew. Thank you." Hope is a cruel thing when you let it grow too big. On the morning of the wedding, I dressed carefully. The navy dress I had bought with weeks of skipped meals, shoes that pinched but looked elegant, my hair professionally styled. The first time in years I'd allowed myself that vanity. I looked in the mirror and told myself, this is the day things change. The church was full of roses and whispers. I watched my son at the altar, tall and handsome in his tuxedo, and my chest swelled with pride. Despite everything, he was still my boy. I wanted so badly to believe that, under Brittany's gloss and control, he was still the child who once clung to me during thunderstorms. The ceremony passed in a blur of vows and camera flashes. Then came the reception, a glittering display of wealth and curated beauty. Gold runners on the tables, champagne glasses clinking, guests laughing loudly enough to prove they belonged. My gift box sat on the table among the others, quiet but waiting. I was assigned to table 12, far in the back, tucked away with Great Aunt Helen and a few distant family friends. I didn't mind. I told myself the seating didn't matter. The gift would speak louder than any placement card. Dinner was served, toast made, laughter ringing like bells. I watched Brittany change from her gown into a sleek reception dress that probably cost more than I'd spent on clothes in 3 years. She floated across the floor, collecting compliments like jewels, until she arrived at my table. "Martha," she said, her smile dazzling, rehearsed. "Could I ask you a tiny favor?" "Of course, dear. Anything." Her voice lowered, sugar over steel. "The photographer's setting up for family photos near the main entrance. But well, with your age, we were hoping you could stand over by the bathroom wall instead. The lighting's just better there. You understand, right?" The room stilled. Forks paused. Aunt Helen's gasp cut the air. But Brittany's smile never wavered. I felt the words burn into me like acid. Too old, too unattractive, too unworthy of standing beside my own son on his wedding day. For a moment, I thought I might break, cry, plead, crumble into the fragile stereotype she wanted me to be. But something else rose instead, something colder, stronger. "I understand perfectly," I said, my voice even. I stood, smoothed my dress, walked to the gift table. My hands did not shake as I lifted the white box with its silver ribbon. The gift that would have rewritten their lives. The gift that would have said, "Here, everything I have is yours." I carried it past the stunned guests, past the photographer angling his lens, past my son, my only child who didn't even notice me leaving. His eyes were on Brittany, as they always were. The heavy doors closed behind me, muffling the laughter, the music, the sound of celebration. Outside, the evening air was cool, the parking lot quiet, except for a few late arrivals. I stood there for a moment, box clutched in my hands, breathing in the silence. 36 years of sacrifice, 36 years of giving until I was hollow. And this was the return, a seat by the bathroom wall. The taxi ride home was short. 15 minutes to realize what I'd done. 15 minutes to understand that leaving wasn't the end of something, it was the beginning. Because inside that box wasn't just a wedding gift. It was power. Proof that sometimes the best revenge isn't raising your voice or begging for respect. Sometimes the best revenge is walking away with everything they thought they'd already been given. And trust me, when they realized what I had carried out of that reception hall, their perfect smiles would finally crack. The phone rang at 8:37 that night. I was sitting in Harold's old chair, the white box resting like a heartbeat on the coffee table. My tea had gone cold, but I didn't care. I knew who it was before I even glanced at the screen. "Mom?" David's voice was tight, threaded with nerves. "Brittany said you left early. Are you feeling okay? Did something happen?" I sipped my tea before answering. I'm feeling better than I have in years. Silence stretched, awkward and heavy. You missed the cake cutting, the bouquet toss. Everyone was asking where you went. I'm sure they were. Mom? His voice shifted, the way it always did when he felt me slipping from his grasp, half pleading, half scolding. What's going on? You're being weird. Weird. 36 years of sacrifice and silence, and now my refusal to sit by a bathroom wall made me weird. I could almost hear Brittany feeding him the lines from across the honeymoon suite. Did your wife explain why I left? I asked. A pause. Too long. She said you seemed upset, but she didn't know why. She feels terrible, Mom. Really. She's worried she did something wrong. Terrible. Worried. Those words landed flat, rehearsed. I pictured Brittany wringing her hands dramatically, her doe-eyed look of innocence masking the blade beneath. Tell her not to worry, I said calmly. I'm sure she'll understand everything soon enough. What does that mean? It means you should enjoy your honeymoon, David. Congratulations on your marriage. I hung up before he could reply. The phone buzzed again 20 minutes later. This time, Brittany's name lit the screen. Against my better judgment, I answered. Martha. She breathed, her voice sweet enough to rot teeth. I'm so sorry if I did something to upset you tonight. You know how weddings are chaotic, stressful. Things come out wrong. Did you ask me to stand by the bathroom wall so I wouldn't ruin your photos with my age? The silence on the other end was delicious. I was just trying to organize the pictures. The photographer suggested, so the photographer told you to hide me? Her tone sharpened, just a fraction. You're taking this the wrong way. I was only trying to help make sure everyone looked their best. I spent money I didn't have on that dress, on my hair. I looked my best, Brittany. But apparently, my best wasn't good enough for your photographs. You're being too sensitive. There it was. The poison word. The one they'd both used for years whenever I dared express hurt. Too sensitive when they canceled Christmas last minute. Too sensitive when David forgot my birthday. Too sensitive when Brittany mocked my clothes. I smiled into the receiver. You're right. I am being too sensitive. Thank you for the reminder. Her relief was audible. So, you'll come to the gift opening tomorrow? We'd love to see you. Oh, I wouldn't miss it, I said, my voice smooth as glass, because I wouldn't. The next afternoon, I stood at their rental house, the box heavy in my hands. Not the white one. That box, with its silver bow and life-altering contents, remained locked away in my bedroom closet. Today I carried something smaller, a decoy. The living room buzzed with leftover guests. Brittany's parents, her siblings, aunts, uncles, friends. Wrapping paper littered the floor as David and Brittany unboxed blenders, crystal, artwork tokens of a perfect start to a perfect life. When they opened my first gift, the crystal wine glasses, Brittany's smile was radiant. Oh, Martha, these are beautiful. Thank you, David said, nodding absently before moving on. I let the silence linger, then cleared my throat. Actually, I brought one more gift. All eyes turned to me as I handed David the small box. He opened it, frowning at the single key and folded slip of paper inside. What's this, Mom? It's the address to my new apartment, Ocean View Towers, Unit 4B. The key's yours to visit whenever you'd like. Brittany's smile faltered, confusion flickering behind her eyes. David scanned the paper again, his face paling. That's the luxury high-rise downtown. How did you? I used some of Harold's life insurance. I realized it was time to think about my future, about living somewhere I'm respected. The room went still. Even Brittany's polished composure cracked. Just for a second, I smiled and folded my hands in my lap. Enjoy the rest of your gifts. I'll see myself out. And with that, I left them to choke on the knowledge that while they were calculating my worth, I had rewritten the equation. For years, the phone only rang when someone needed something from me. A check, a cosign, a reminder that I was useful, not cherished. After the wedding, the phone rang constantly, but not for the reasons they expected. It began with polite curiosity. Mom, David said one evening, trying for casual. We drove past your new place. Ocean View Towers, huh? That's nice. Really nice. I stirred sugar into my tea, watching the swirl dissolve. Yes, it is. Rent must be insane. Are you sure that's smart? I'm not renting, David. I own it. The silence on the line stretched like a snap cord. The next day, Brittany called. Martha, we're thrilled for you. Independence is so important at your age. But with a place like that, You'll want to make sure you have the right financial planning. Have you updated your will? There it was, the mask slipping. I bit back a laugh. My affairs are in order, Brittany. Thank you for your concern. Concern. A word that sounded like care but smelled like hunger. Within weeks, whispers turned to investigations. A friend at the building's front desk slipped me a note one afternoon. Your son's wife has been asking questions about your lease, your bank. You may want to be careful. I didn't need the warning. I already knew. The looks they gave me at family dinners were no longer dismissive. They were calculating. One Sunday, David appeared at my door with coffee in hand, his smile strained. Mom, we should talk. Brittany and I, we just worry. This all seems impulsive moving, spending. Are you sure you thought this through? I let him in, watched him scan my leather sofa, my granite countertops, the view that stretched across the harbor. His eyes betrayed him. Pride? No envy. I've never been more certain of anything, I said. But what about medical bills? Mom? Care. Long-term needs. I cut him off. Are you worried about my well-being, David? Or about your inheritance? He flushed, caught between denial and honesty. That's not fair. I leaned forward. Neither was being asked to. Stand by a bathroom wall. The words hung between us, heavier than the silence that followed. Days later, Brittany showed up herself, armed with cookies and contrition. Martha, I've been sick about what I said at the wedding. Truly sick. I didn't mean to hurt you. She dabbed at imaginary tears. Your family. Which is why David and I want you over for dinner. Just us. To clear the air. I sipped my coffee, watching her eyes flick from my curtains to my jewelry box to the fresh flowers on the counter. She wasn't here for reconciliation. She was casing the joint. That's kind, Brittany. But I'm busy this weekend. Oh, then next weekend? Busy then too. Her mask cracked just for a second. Busy with what? I smiled sweetly. Various things. Exploring my options. The phrase landed like a dart. She left soon after. Cookies forgotten on the counter. I threw them away. Store-bought, despite her claims. Just like her apologies. But the real shift came with the investigators. A discreet envelope arrived at my door one morning, my own private investigator's report. I had hired Rebecca Chen after Brittany's little fishing expedition, and she was thorough. David and Brittany were drowning in debt. Credit cards maxed out. Student loans lingering. A mortgage that ate half their income. Their financial future had been pinned, like a butterfly, on the assumption that one day my small apartment and modest savings would be theirs. Instead, I'd outgrown their calculations. The next calls came sharper, more desperate. Mom, have you considered long-term care insurance? At your age, it's risky not to. Have you updated your beneficiaries lately? David knows a financial advisor who could really help you. I laughed after each call. The same mouths that had dismissed me now begged for a place at the table they once shoved me under. One evening, the phone rang again. Mom, David said carefully, is it true? Did you win the lottery? The words landed like a spark in dry grass. They knew. Maybe not everything, but enough. I looked out at the harbor, boats cutting through the dusk, water glowing gold. The deed to the beach house sat in my desk drawer untouched, waiting. Their names were written across it once, before Brittany's. Cruel smile rewrote the story. Very weird coincidence, I said lightly. But if someone did win that kind of money, they'd probably want to be very careful about who they told. Family, friends, people can change when money's involved. The irony nearly made me laugh aloud. On the other end, David hesitated. Mom, what are you saying? I'm saying some gifts are too precious to give to people who don't respect the giver. I hung up before he could answer, because the time for asking was over. The time for reckoning had begun. The call came on a Saturday morning, precisely 9 a.m. as if they had rehearsed it. Mom? David's voice was hollow, stripped of its usual confidence. We found out about the beach house. I set my coffee cup down, walked out. Onto the deck. The Atlantic shimmered under the rising sun, each wave curling like a secret kept too long. Did you? A private investigator confirmed it. Lighthouse Drive, 2.8 million, bought in cash. His voice cracked. Was that supposed to be our wedding gift? I let the silence stretch. In it, I could hear their desperation, their hope clinging by a thread. Finally, I answered, yes, it was. On the other end, I heard a sharp inhale. Brittany, maybe, or David's own grief. I wrapped it up, I continued. Deed to this house. A cashier's check for $3 million. tied with a silver bow. I imagined your faces when you opened it. The shock, the gratitude, perhaps even an apology. Mom, his voice broke, small like a boy again. But that didn't happen, I said, my tone calm, deliberate. Because instead of standing beside my son in family photos, I was told to stand by a bathroom wall. There was no reply, only the faint sound of someone crying. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine, real wine, not the box kind I used to ration, and sat on my deck. The ocean breathed steady beneath me, as though it were keeping time with my heart. My phone buzzed relentlessly, messages, voicemails, apologies rehearsed, excuses wrapped in soft tones. I didn't answer, because this wasn't just about a cruel comment. It was about 36 years of being useful but invisible, of giving without being seen, of shrinking myself so others could feel larger. The truth was sharp and simple. They had mistaken my love for weakness. And weakness, when it wakes, can look a lot like strength. 2 days later, Brittany showed up at the high-rise apartment I still kept as a decoy. The doorman, well compensated for his discretion, told me she had sat in the lobby for 3 hours, waiting, watching, probably rehearsing tears in a compact mirror. When she realized I wasn't coming, she left. A week later, David called again. This time, his voice was raw. Mom, please, don't do this. We're family, family, I repeated softly, looking out at the horizon. Isn't family the people who stand beside you, not push you to the shadows? You're punishing us for one mistake, he whispered. No, David, I'm teaching you what one choice can cost. He said nothing. And for the first time, neither did I. In the weeks that followed, I began to feel something I hadn't in years: freedom. I walked barefoot on my private beach at dawn, the sand cool and wet between my toes. I cooked meals that didn't involve counting coins. I filled my house with books, flowers, music, things chosen simply because they brought me joy, and I began drafting the foundation papers, the Williams Fund for Elder Independence, a cause close to my heart. Too many mothers, too many fathers, reduced to ATMs by the very children they raised. I would make sure they had choices too. Every day, I grew lighter, stronger. The past was not gone, but it no longer weighed me down. The final call came at sunset. My phone buzzed, and I let it ring for times before answering. Mom, David said, his voice quiet, resigned. We're sorry for everything. We just want to fix this. I looked out at the horizon, the sun melting into the water like a golden coin slipping beneath the surface. Some things can't be fixed, David. Some things can only be learned from. He swallowed hard. So what happens now? Now, I whispered. Now I live my life. The one I've earned. The one you stopped seeing. Silence. Then softly, will we ever see you again? I let the ocean answer for me. The waves thundered against the shore, steady and endless. Perhaps, I said finally, when you learn the difference between love and entitlement. And then I ended the call. I set the phone on the table, lifted my glass of wine, and let the silence settle. For the first time in decades, the silence wasn't empty. It was mine. The Atlantic stretched out before me, infinite, unstoppable. Waves rolled in, erasing footprints from the sand, carrying the past out to sea. I closed my eyes and breathed deep. No applause, no forgiveness begged or withheld. Just the steady rhythm of water against shore, reminding me that quiet power beats loud shame every time. And in that moment, I knew the best revenge isn't getting even, it's getting free.